Good morning, everybody. Deacon Tim Wyman here, and it's Thursday morning. It's 10 o'clock, so it must mean it's the Parish Coffee Hour with Father Paul and friends. So, welcome to everybody, and just get us started right off by turning it over to our rector, Father Paul Prable. Here you go, Father Paul. Good morning.
Well, good morning. And Deacon Tim, as we're doing this program by Zoom, thanks for starting us in a very jazzy way as we get started today. Our guest is Jason Hall, who's the executive director of the Catholic Conference of Kentucky. Their office is in Frankfort. And so we're very glad you're with us today, Jason. And I'll get us started with a prayer. Lord, you tell us and you pray for us and you pray for our world that we'll all be one. We are certainly in a time frame when we're praying for unity in so many ways, and certainly unity within our nation and in our world as we have so many serious issues to address. We ask you to guide us in this conversation today, that we'll be able to help our listeners to embrace the importance of being politically active and astute, and trusting the power of grassroots advocacy. So we pray to you as we offer this day and this session to you. It's one more way of praising you, and hopefully one more way of sharing in your ministry. We pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, Jason, it's very good that you're with us. And, right from the get-go, I think it's kind of providential that it's the day after Inauguration Day. And as somebody who's on the periphery of the political world in Frankfort, any impressions that you'd like to offer from yesterday's Inauguration Day?
Well, I don't know about, the day, I'm very grateful that it went off without any disturbances or violence. I think there was some concern, quite a bit of concern about that after January 6th. Yeah. But I think, my general thoughts about transfers of power, whether it be at the presidential level, where there's a lot of, very serious things that happen when we think about, like the nuclear football and all of that passing from one person to another. Just in general, with any transition in elected office, where even with when a governor of Kentucky comes or goes at an inauguration, I think one of the issues I see with our politics today is that we invest those things with so much meaning, and not as one public official moving on and another one coming in. And I would every administration, certainly gubernatorial administration in Frankfort I've worked with, we've had things we could work together on. We've had things we've had to oppose them on. And that's the give and take of politics. And I know with the Biden administration at the federal level, we'll have disagreements, but we'll also hopefully have some areas of agreement that we can build some, do some positive things. And then we'll just keep on keeping on.
Well, while we're on that topic, again, our listeners and beyond have been part of a prayer process that we've been trying to do to be part of hopefully the universal team that was praying for a good day yesterday. So thanks for everybody who's been part of that. Well, let's get to the topic. What is the Catholic Conference of Kentucky?
Well, the concept of a bishop's conference goes back a long way. I know the precursor to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops goes back to the World War I era, and the idea of a state conference came much later. But after Vatican II, as national bishops' conferences became, and the revision there was a revision of the Code of Canon Law in the 80s, and various changes through that process made national bishops' conferences into organizations that were not just cooperative, but actually had a formal function within the church in terms of setting various rules and within church law, with liturgical guidelines, that sort of thing, rubric. And so during that period, bishops also began forming cooperative conferences at the state level for the purpose of engaging in public policy. And so most state conferences began as a staffed kind of concerted effort engaging with state governments in the 70s and 80s. Some more recent than that, but that was a kind of a time of a lot being formed. And the Catholic Conference of Kentucky was formed in 1984. And we've had a staffed presence in Frankfort, engaging with both the executive and legislative branches of the state government since then.
Okay. How many staff members are there with the Catholic Conference?
We have 3 staff members. Myself, our associate director is Andrew Vandiver, and then we have an administrative assistant, Karen Chambers, who manages our office for us.
Okay. How does the job description between Andrew and yourself, how is that broken down in terms of various responsibilities?
Well, I kind of deal with most of the oversight of, the relationship with between us and the bishops and kind of those top level things. Andrew has a kind of a basket of issues, a portfolio of issues that he deals with, principally education related. So we will talk about this a little later, but our efforts in recent years to expand educational choice, Andrew has been very involved in that, and other issues that impact our Catholic school. And then we also just kind of divide things between, because there are 2 of us, we have a very good working relationship. So we kind of divide things as they come up and among ourselves. Yeah.
And some of that involves, I guess, doing research and then, whatever it is to be an advocate, to be on the scene and talk to the legislative members on an individual basis or small group basis and try to help them to see the Catholic way. I guess that's part of it too. Huh?
Well, and relationship building, I would say that's, you kind of touched on that with getting to know, but just, when you're, when you're basically a full-time lobbyist in Frankfort, I mean, you have to get to know the legislators and the officials in the executive branch who, who have the ability to do things that you would like them to do, or to stop things you would like to be stopped. And you have to, have those relationships and build trust over time. I think one of the things that is very good is because we're the church, we don't engage in any direct activity whatsoever related to campaigns or, elections. And so I think that has left us with the ability to form relationships kind of across the aisle with folks all along the political spectrum. And so somebody might disagree with us or not want to do what we'd like them to do, what we're asking them to do, or support a particular bill or whatnot. But there are very few people that will not sit down with us and hear us out. And I think that's a great benefit to being in our position.
Yeah. And that's been, I guess, crafted just by relationships over the last 30, 40 years of people doing it in a good way who've been in your position. How did you get to this position? How long have you been doing it? How'd you get there?
I've been with the conference for 10 years. Actually, this February 1st will be 10 years. And I, from 2005 until 2009, I worked for the Kentucky State Senate Majority Leadership. And prior to that, I worked for a brief time for the Justice Cabinet in the executive branch. And so as with the Senate, I did a lot of policy related work, developing legislation and engaging with outside groups. In fact, I met quite often with the executive director for the Catholic Conference at that time, Ed Monahan, who is a Catholic in Lexington. Mm-hmm. And we, in 2009, I left to be a seminarian for the Diocese of Lexington, and did that for a while, discerned that was not the path God was calling me down. And so in 2011, I went to work for the conference, and I've been here ever since. In 2014, I became the executive director.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have do you need a legal background to do what you're doing? A law degree or?
I think it's helpful in the sense that, being able to look at a statute or a bill that could become statutory law and see be familiar with how courts might interpret that, or what the legal kind of, and I don't, members of your audience may know this, that, when it comes to the law, there are terms of art that are used, like things that have been interpreted by the courts for many years and have a particular meaning that might not be apparent to a non-lawyer. So I think that's helpful, but no, it's not essential. Certainly there have been a number of my predecessors who were not lawyers but knew policy very well and had deep background in policy areas that we work on. And so it's an asset, but not a necessity.
I got you. Okay. Well, what's it like? The General Assembly, it meets, I think, for a session, and right now it's on a break, and then it picks up again. That's a standard, isn't it, in terms of how the Assembly works?
Yeah, the Constitution, state Constitution, sets up annual sessions with 30 days during the odd-numbered years and 60 days during the even-numbered years. Those are legislative days, the days they actually gavel in. So not calendar days. If they don't meet, they don't burn a day. But they have to finish by the end of March for the 30-day sessions, and by the middle of April in the 60-day session. So what you get if you kind of look at a calendar in the 30-day sessions, that gives them a lot more time to kind of work with. And so the standard traditional thing is to come in for 4 days at the beginning of January, because that's during the odd year, that's a new legislature, right? Because the election was the previous November. So you've got the new folks coming in, and so they have to elect their officers and choose their leadership. Typically those first 4 days are for that, and then they leave and come back in February to pick up with, day 4 or 5 and of the 30 days and continue on. But this time it's different. The reason I went through all that is to say that it's different this year. They used 8 days at the beginning of the month in order to pass a number of bills that they had prioritized, as well as to get the budget process started. Because of COVID, they did not do a 2-year budget, which is normal during the 60-day session last year. They did a 1-year budget because of uncertainty about what revenue would be like with COVID. So they do have to do a budget during this 30-day session. Only feels like 30 years. A 30-day session with a budget kind of is a unique situation, and so they're have moved some days around. So as with everything during COVID, things are different.
Yeah. Are many of the legislators present, or wearing masks and being distant, or are they doing most of their work by Zoom and things like that?
They're doing committee meetings by Zoom. They changed the rules, House and Senate rules, to allow for that, to allow for voting remotely in committee meetings, and they can question witnesses over Zoom and that sort of thing. On the floor action, they have the House is allowing voting from their offices, so they can stay in their offices in the Capitol Annex and vote remotely. The Senate is allowing remote voting in committee, but not on the floor. But they are spacing out. They have it set up so that people can be spaced out and then just come onto the floor to vote. And the Senate is a much smaller group of people, so they're able to do that a little easier. There are only 38 senators, whereas there are 100 House members.
Okay. Now, one of the things we encounter in the church every once in a while when we, preach about the social situation is, the church should not be involved in politics, and I think the best answers would be saying not partisan politics, but morality, and as politics impacts morality, the church really needs to be involved in order to help everybody, to help the common good, to help everybody to live in a good way. Does that make some sense to you? And how would you respond to that question of the church's role as a political lobbyist?
Yeah, I think that, the argument that the church shouldn't be involved in politics, I think there is some truth in that, in the sense that the church should not become aligned with a temporal political movement, become too closely aligned with a political ideology. We should always have, as with all kind of, earthly things, we should have a certain amount of detachment However, politics, the work of politics, is how we organize our society, how we organize the cities we live in, the communities, the state we live in, the nation, even international affairs, involve issues of justice and morality. And so in that sense, Catholics have certainly as much obligation as anyone else to engage in that work as individuals and groups. But also, we have in our tradition a long tradition of very grounded, very sound social thought and ideas about how well-developed and closely held ideas on issues of justice in society, on issues of justice when it comes from both legal justice as well as social justice. And so we have an obligation to engage not for politics' sake, in the sense of, as I said, becoming aligned with political movements, but in the sense of doing our part to love our neighbor through that way. Because how we order our society, what the law says, what is valued, where our tax dollars are spent, those kinds of things have moral implications. And so absolutely, we should speak to those things and be involved. Well, I had one other point, which actually has slipped my mind, but.
Well, that's pretty thorough already. That's good. When it's a typical year, say a non-pandemic year, how do you go about it on a typical day when this assembly's in session? How do you lobby? How do you do that?
Well, that actually, creating a lot of challenges this year because of the differences. In a normal year, we are in that building, the Capitol and Capitol Annex complex in Frankfurt, virtually every single day. And there's a lot to our jobs. I mean, what we do, the advantage to being kind of a paid lobbyist as opposed to, a citizen who may choose to get involved, is our ability to be there on a day-to-day basis. And a huge part of what I do in a normal session is be present in that building, attend the committee meetings, catch people in the hallways, kind of pick up the word from other lobbyists and legislators and others about what's likely to happen or what bills are likely to be considered in the coming days. And as I said, just the catching people in the hallways is a huge part of kind of getting a chance to talk to a legislator. So that's a large part of what I do in a normal session. We work, of course, alongside other groups. So coalition building around particular issues is very important. Mm-hmm. When you have a number of groups, particularly if they're groups that don't work together on everything, and they have a lot of differences, but on a particular issue, you kind of see eye to eye. Sometimes you can, by working those things out in person, can help move things along.
Mm-hmm. Sound like you drink a lot of coffee.
Oh, I drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah, because some of it's hanging out, basically, I guess, and
it's a large part of it is
being available. Yeah. Now, do you wind up doing a lot of it, after in the evening hours too?
Well, I used to do a lot more of that. There's kind of a Frankfurt social scene, I guess. They have receptions and various things that different groups put on over the course of the session. And that's a good opportunity to kind of do some of that relationship building in terms of just chatting with the legislator, as opposed to having 5 minutes with them to talk about a bill. You can actually talk about ask them questions about themselves. They can tell them about what your own background and just kind of get to know people. That has changed over time. That social scene used to be much more active. Now it's for good reasons. I mean, obviously, as you can imagine, some of that can be opportunities for less than ideal things to happen, and so that's kind of been reined in over time. Mm-hmm. Just in the time I've been in Frankfurt. But definitely, I think those just talking about like an industry reception or something where everybody's invited and you have just kind of a chance to mill about and talk outside of the Capitol and outside of those kind of short, quick conversations can be a big part of it for sure.
Do other denominations, other religious groups have a similar office or a similar ministry to the Catholic Conference of Kentucky?
Well, as far as I know, and the ones that I work with, the Kentucky Baptist Convention does have someone who part-time represents them in Frankfort. There was a good, actually I've been good friends with virtually all the folks that have done that. They've just had a transition to a new person. But someone I've known for a long time. And then the Kentucky Council of Churches is also quite active. And we are members of the Council of Churches, so that would include us as well, but it also includes a number of the mainline Protestant denominations and some other groups as well. They have long been very active in policy advocacy. So I work quite closely with their folks as well.
Well, let's talk about what's happening this year, and I'll name some of the issues that we might talk about in depth. And gosh, our viewers might even want to take notes in terms of a particular number of a bill or so that they might want to reach out with regard to. What are we concerned with in terms of right to life, or as you might say, the slowing down of abortions, even the wiping out that it's legal, however that's working. What's sort of on the docket with you guys this year?
Yeah, on that topic, some of your viewers may already be aware of this, but the House and Senate moved very quickly this year to pass Senate Bill 9, which is the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. That had passed last session on the very last day and had another bill added to it. And so it was a little more complicated than just the straightforward Born Alive bill. But the governor vetoed that. And so because they had passed it on the last day, they had no opportunity for override. This time they moved very quickly during those first 8 days and sent that to the governor's desk. He has until today to act. As of last night, he had not done anything with that bill. But if he does veto it, then they will have plenty of time when they come back in February to override, which they have announced that they've indicated they intend to do. But our number one priority on right to life is, let me make sure I get all my bill numbers correct, House Bill 91, which is a constitutional amendment that clarifies that there's no right to an abortion in the state constitution. And people may say, why is that necessary? The thing is, other states have started to do this, and Louisiana just did this in November on their ballot. They had a constitutional amendment the voters approved. But in some states, most recently in Iowa, you have had the state Supreme Court basically declare a right to abortion under the state constitution. And so you get basically a state level Roe v. Wade in that situation. And we have had so many victories on pro-life legislation over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, abortions after 20 weeks are illegal in Kentucky outside of some very narrow cases. We have an ultrasound requirement. We have a very strong informed consent statute. Number of things, a lot of things that we have done that could theoretically, even if the federal courts are upholding these things, which they tend to, our ultrasound bill was upheld by the federal courts. Ultrasound law, I should say, was upheld. But there would be some concern that at least potentially the state courts could roll some of that back. And so what House Bill 91 would do is prevent that from ever happening. It would just say that there is no right to an abortion in the state constitution. So that would have to go on the ballot in 2022, next November of next year. So we hope that either this session or next session, the House and Senate need to pass that and put that on the ballot for 2022.
How do you see the development of allies for pushing a bill like that?
Well, there are a number of groups interested in that. I think the challenge, frankly, on a bill like that is that there are I want to be very careful how I said. There are certain bills that I think tend to get a lot of attention and excitement around them, and sometimes bills like this, because they're more of a technical legal point, even though that's very, very important in the long run, that we don't have a state level Roe v. Wade type decision. I think it's harder to get people kind of engaged on it. But as far as I know, all of the pro-life and kind of more socially conservative type organizations have endorsed this bill and are working on it to one extent or another. So, certainly the Kentucky Baptist Convention and Kentucky Right to Life and the Family Foundation, those groups have been very supportive of it. So I think our main challenge with it is frankly to move it up the priority list. It's not that people, that other pro-life groups are not for it, or that, we're all for it. It's that we need to impress upon leadership that this is a priority for the pro-life community. I think that's what is a task before us.
How do you talk with a legislator who would be saying, I'm with you, this really ought to be a law, but I don't think my constituency wants it? How do you help somebody like that to move to the next level?
That can be very challenging. So there are cases where we're working on an issue and we are told that look, I get what you're saying, but my folks back home are just not there. That's not what they want. Typically what our approach to that is to try to find allies. We do this all the time. We have, particularly it's maybe easier for us than a lot of other groups because we have parishes across the state and we might have other allies who have, our council of churches or Kentucky Baptist Convention who might have congregations. And we will go to those paths. We'll try to get constituents to voice that, no, you do have constituents that care about this issue and want to see it happen. A lot of times, legislators hear from one side on a particular issue, and they get the impression that I don't have a lot of constituents that on the other side. And so a lot of times we will do that. If that's an obstacle to moving a bill, that we need to just convince some legislators that they do have constituents who really want this to happen, then we try to find those constituents and try to engage those folks to reach out.
Good. What seems to be the most important issues, potential bills with regard to the death penalty? Well,
we have Senate Bill 60 is sponsored by Senator Stephen Meredith, who this is actually, I was not aware he was going to file that bill. I'm really pleased that he's taking a leadership role on this, to have I didn't talk about this early on, but we have the kind of partisan situation in Frankfort is that we have, Republican supermajorities in both houses. And so to have a Republican sponsor of a bill is very important in any bill, because sometimes Democratic bills just get lost in the shuffle, or there just aren't many Democrats left in the legislature. So we have a Senate Republican, Senator Meredith, who stepped up and is sponsoring the abolition bill, Senate Bill 60. So we're very pleased about that and think that shows progress. House Bill 148 is a bill that we've, similar to a bill we've been working on for a number of years, which is more of an incremental step, but I think we've gotten this one partway through the process, and I'm hopeful that it will not be long before we get it all the way through. But it would basically exclude from the death penalty folks that have diagnosed severe mental illness. And there's a list of diagnosable severe mental illnesses in the text that if a person is diagnosed with that at the time of the crime, they would not be eligible for the death penalty. This is kind of, as I said, one of those incremental steps to try to lessen some of the injustices that happen in that process. Like I said, we've gotten that bill through committees, and we just have never been able to quite get it across the finish line. So hopefully, we're starting it from the House this time. It's been in the Senate in the past, but we'll see if we can get that one through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gosh, it seems to me, that if somebody's a victim of mental illness and severe mental illness, and no matter what they do, they're a victim of mental illness more than a criminal. Again,
yeah, and to
we
be
want
honest,
to keep the world safe from them, but still.
yeah, yeah, and this would not affect the ability to incarcerate people even for the rest of their lives. It would just deal with the death penalty. And to be fair to the folks who have opposed this bill, I don't think that the opposition is so much we want to execute people with severe mental illness. I think it's been a long process of making this work from a legal standpoint of how this would be shown in court and the hearing process and that sort of thing. And a lot of work has gone into that to get the bill to a point where it is clear in the law what a court is supposed to do when severe mental illness is alleged and how they're to go about making the finding that there is severe mental illness and therefore the death penalty is not on the table. So it's been a lot of technical problems with it more than the substance.
Yeah. Now there's an organization, the Kentuckians Against the Death Penalty.
The Kentucky Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine they're fairly active in terms of working with these kinds of issues.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And they're focused mostly on the abolition effort. Mm-hmm. So they are not as involved in the incremental steps because they're trying to hasten the day that abolition happens. But yeah, we work with them quite closely and have for a number of years.
Yeah. Okay, good. What's kind of brewing in terms of possible issues of looking at prison reform in our state?
Well, we are members. We are, I think, in our 5th year, but we were a founding member of the Kentucky Smart on Crime Coalition. It's actually become a big part of what we do is advocating for criminal justice reform. We've had some big successes. I think that the general approach, that has really gained traction in Frankfurt and in a lot of states is the idea that in the 90s, we took America generally took a very tough on crime approach. And there was a lot of justification for that. We were seeing higher crime rates than a lot of people saw, a lot of at least perceived justification for some of the things. But the result has been a kind of a dramatic over-incarceration of folks to a point where, in Kentucky, for example, our problem is that we have so many felony offenses that are nonviolent offenses. We're not talking about, serious violent crimes. All crimes are serious. I'm not diminishing, but we're talking many times about nonviolent offenses that a person may commit, particularly when they're young, and it follows them for the rest of their lives. If you're a felon, you have a felony conviction, it limits your employment opportunities. It limits all sorts of ability to access various things for the rest of your life. You're unable to vote for the rest of your life. And so a lot of what we work on and deals with that, with second chances, with the ability for someone who does not reoffend to eventually get beyond that felony conviction, also drug treatment, reentry, those sorts of things. So in that spirit, kind of some of the bills we're working on this session, House Bill 126 deals with the felony theft threshold. This is the amount where with theft, it goes from being a misdemeanor to a felony. Right now, that amount is $500. So if you steal something under $500, it's a misdemeanor. Over $500 is a felony. This bill would raise that to $1,000, which is much more in line with our surrounding states. $500 is the lowest level. So for example, if a 19-year-old, just as an example, a 19-year-old steals an iPhone, that's a felony under current law. And so if they're convicted of that, they would be a felon for the rest of their lives. And so I think this is just kind of, that's the kind of statute anyway, because it has a dollar amount in the statute. It needs to be raised because of inflation anyway, but it also would take a lot of offenses. They would still be misdemeanors. People could still go to jail, but it would not saddle them with a felony for the rest of their life.
Okay. Jason, I would speak, I guess, on this next topic as a priest of the Diocese of Lexington that embraces Eastern Kentucky. So, we sometimes see Eastern Kentucky as a place that's been sort of taken advantage of in one way or another in terms of resources, and coal certainly issues these days. And I'm not sure if there's any Eastern Kentucky specific bills that are out there that you're working towards. Just kind of curious on that.
No, I think those kinds of topics are always, very hot topics in Frankfurt, as far as like economic development. And
I'm thinking of that, or land reform, or
transitioning. Yeah, Mountaintop Removal. Now, that was something that there were a number of years that we were part of a group speaking out on that. Certainly, with some of the coal, as coal has declined, there have been a lot of workers left in the lurch. And so there have been issues related to that, with kind of the workers' rights, making workers whole. Obviously, there are healthcare issues related to that. So we have, at the moment, where I can't think of a bill that is specific kind of to economic or environmental challenges in Eastern Kentucky that we're actively working on. But certainly there have been in the past, and it is an area I know that all of the bishops of Lexington have always had a particular interest in. But as of the present moment, I don't think there is a bill that I can think of that would speak directly to that.
Okay. I think Deacon Tim's got a couple of themes that have come in. Would you like to jump in, Tim?
Yeah, just well, actually, Barbara asked a question, but I think, and then I came up with my own question here. I said, do you ever lobby the governor seeking his support where he might be likely to oppose a bill that you are pretty sure is going to go his way towards him? And then the second question from Barbara is, do you lobby for or against the override of a veto?
Yes. So the answer to the second one, do we ever lobby for or against override of a veto? We absolutely do. We have lobbied in favor of overrides a number of times, and have lobbied, I'm pretty sure, against overrides, although those examples aren't sticking out to me. As far as lobbying the governor to sign a bill or veto a bill, at that stage, we do that as well. Like, we typically will reach out ourselves to the governor and encourage him to sign, or if we have a concern with the bill, we may ask for a veto. But as far as, we have an alert system, which, by the way, I want to make sure I mention that you can go to ccky.org and click on down the page. You'll see Become a Faithful Citizen Advocate. Click on that. You can be added to our email list. We do at times encourage people to call or email the governor to encourage him to either sign or veto. The governor can also, by the way, allow a bill to become law without a signature, which is a technicality, but basically to not veto a bill. We don't do that. I think just generally, I try to focus our efforts on where I think they'll make the most difference. So sometimes people will ask me, why didn't we do an alert on this or that? And one of the factors that I consider in that is how much I've been asking of people lately, or how much I think I will have to ask of people on our list going forward. Because my experience is that people will call Frankfurt so many times, and then you start to really get a drop off. So, for example, Senate Bill 9, the Born Alive bill, passed last session on the last day. We did an alert and got hundreds of emails sent to the governor encouraging him to sign the bill. We were unsuccessful in that, but we thought it was an important effort to try to get him to sign that bill if we could convince him to do so. This time, it's on his desk right now, but I did not do an alert because the legislature is committed to overriding in the event he does veto. So it's just kind of a picking our battles, I guess, kind of judgment. I don't want to burn people out this early in session by asking them to email and phone call when there's something that really might make a difference down the road, if that makes sense. But the answer to the question is yes, we do all of those things.
Do you find the governor to be at all accessible for a person-to-person conversation occasionally?
Well, And we have had, every governor is different. This governor, to be honest, I mean, he was in office 3 months when COVID slammed down on everything. So our relationship with this governor has not developed in the way in which it normally would. I will say this, that the governor's office, he has put some folks in his office, kind of charged them with being liaisons to various groups in relation to COVID, so that as we have concerns about the regulations that are being put down, passed around, or being proposed to be implemented, they have been very responsive on those things. And we've had regular conversations, not with the governor, occasionally with the governor himself, but for the most part with folks in his office. And I am pretty pleased with their accessibility on that. Also, when it comes to some of the federal aid, like from the CARES Act, and then this more recent federal legislation that was passed in December, there are certain things that the governor has to apply for that to then kind of unlock the funds to flow to Kentucky. And he has been very responsive and very committed to applying for everything that we possibly can. So in that sense, we've had a good working relationship, but it has been absolutely dominated by COVID. We haven't had the normal chance to meet with him.
Well, what's brewing with regard to private schools in this General Assembly, which of course would include the Catholic schools? And might even be some Catholic schools specific bills, but maybe private schools, religious schools, So.
Yes. So we have our effort that we've been working on for a number of years. We've always called it scholarship tax credits, but this time we're moving. There's some slight tweaks to that. Educational opportunity accounts is the term. Basically, it's a more flexible account that would then enable people to use for multiple expenses, including tuition for a public school. But just for folks who may not be interested in the general idea, the idea is to give a tax credit to donors to incentivize private giving to scholarship granting organizations, who would then grant needs-based assistance to students. So it's kind of a two-step process. On the one hand, you have a tax credit to incentivize the giving. And then, on the other hand, kind of the second phase is those organizations that are regulated by the revenue cabinet, they would, students could apply for assistance for a certain, for expenses on a list, eligible expenses. And one of those would be tuition for non-public schools. That would be, I think, the lion's share of what it would be for. But because of the COVID experience, and so many folks have had to basically homeschool, or just in terms of experiences, even when you're enrolled in a public school, there are just expenses that have come, down on folks that folks have experienced over the past several, months. And so the new bill would provide a lot more flexibility to meet those needs. That has been our education priority for many years in one form or another. I think this new form is really a positive development, because it really appeals to folks who, beyond just the, school choice kind of reason to support it, there's also many other benefits that could come from it.
You've mentioned several times, of course, we're in that zone of COVID. Any interaction you all have had with regard to some of the COVID legislation in terms of the directives and mandates that have been, offered by the governor? As this series has gone on, we've had a great session also with Dr. Stack, so we're kind of in touch with that. But that goes back a couple months. So anyway, any reflections on that dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's been obviously tension, I think, that spilled over into the press. Tension is inevitable, I think, in these kinds of situations. It's a legitimate emergency that required a lot of tough decisions to be made. Certainly in the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of confusion. And when the governor issued various directives. And I mean, we had to take the unprecedented step, of course, of suspending public masses for several weeks. And that was a jarring thing, perhaps even more jarring than closing our schools to in-person instruction. I think as time has gone on, as I said, I think we've developed a good working relationship that has not been without, I mean, I don't know, there has been friction, but I think that, there's been a lot of give and take. I think that, we've learned a lot over the course of this about how to manage these kind of emergencies. I'm hopeful that we will all be long gone and have forgotten all of those things before another emergency like this happens. But as far as the policy, it's one of those areas where it's very difficult to kind of stay focused on the substance without the politics entering in. And so it's I'm hopeful that we're coming out of this and that we are not going to have further waves that cause this to go on. But our approach has been to try to navigate as best we can in the most responsible way in light of the health realities, but also kind of respecting. It's a tough thing to balance, but on the one hand, the government can very much overreach when it comes to imposing directives on religious organizations, on schools. But at the same time, civil authorities have legitimate role in kind of charting a course through an emergency. And so we've tried to keep both of those realities very much in mind and navigate as best we can. I know that's not very specific, but I don't know that I have any real insightful or incisive comments on that.
Yeah, well, we're in the same ballpark. I describe myself as sort of like the captain of the lifeboat. And just got to make decisions and try to keep everybody safe as we move forward.
Yeah.
How do you relate to Catholic legislators? You probably know who they are, or most of them, and what's that like?
Well, that's a great question. As you're well aware, there are many different attitudes and opinions and political affiliations among the Catholic population, and that certainly is reflected in the legislature. There are Catholic legislators with whom I work extremely well. They are knowledgeable about Catholic social teaching. They understand where we're coming from. Even if they make a different judgment on something, they're very respectful of where we're coming from and what the church would like to see happen. There have been a few over the years, Catholic legislators, that we've had more friction on. I think you have some who have had the attitude that I represent them, and so they should tell me what I should be working on. And but generally, I think a Catholic legislator is, on the whole, Catholic legislators have been very open, and they want to work with the church, and they want to take into. And even when we have friction, it's on an issue. There's typically a greater level of understanding of where each other is coming from than there might be with others.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's bring it to the folks who are watching the program. How can typical parishioners in a Kentucky parish be involved in the work of the Catholic Conference of Kentucky?
Well, I mentioned earlier the signing up for our email list, and I do need to say that we're in the process of revising our entire kind of website and web presence, and so there's going to be a lot of changes happening with that. It's become a bit outdated, but you can go. What I would recommend folks to do is go to ccky.org. You will see, if you go down a page just a little bit, become a faithful citizen advocate. That will take you to the page to sign up for our emails. That's the best way. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. You can search Catholic Conference of Kentucky on Facebook, and we're CC of KY on Twitter. And we're, fairly active on those two platforms. So if you're on either of those, please like us and follow us. And then, we do have, in non-COVID times, we do have Catholics at the Capitol events, and we have other events that you should keep an eye out for, and that will give you a chance to. We try to facilitate engagement with legislators and help people kind of get engaged. I think a lot of becoming involved in policy advocacy involves a lot of getting over the hump when it comes to just being comfortable with it. There's kind of a acclimation process, and we try to help facilitate that and make it as easy as possible so that Catholics can engage on their own. You know, the political involvement is primarily the province of the laity. The church teaches that, and so we try to equip the laity to engage in that work.
By and large, do Frankfurt's legislators read their mail or have somebody trusted on their staff read it and interpret it for them?
If you email a legislator, or there's a legislative message line that you can call to leave a message for a legislator, all of those will be read. They definitely, especially if you're a constituent. Now, if you're writing to other legislators whose district you don't live in, it might be different. But if you write a letter, an email, or make a phone call, the phone calls are transcribed and delivered to the legislator. They read every single one of those. Absolutely.
Is any of them, any of those three ways of call, email, or a regular postage mail, is any of them more effective, or are they pretty much all the same in terms of the weight given them?
I think it depends on the legislator a little bit, but I would recommend either a direct email or a phone call to leave a message, transcribed message at the switchboard, because I know for a fact that legislators every day go through their constituent emails, and they call them, the phone calls they call green slips, where they get they're electronic now, not physical, but they get the they get who called, what their address is, so they know they're in the district, and then a transcription of what that person said on the phone, and they'll get back to you most of the time too. If you leave a respectful, please support this, please oppose this, thank you for supporting this or oppose, they will typically respond, and that's a good way to kind of start a relationship with them too.
How can we find out, who our representatives are and how to contact them? Again, that might be a lobby 101 kind of question, but some of us are there.
Well, if you call the switchboard and give them your address, they will tell you. And then if you go to legislature.ky.gov, that's the General Assembly's website, and you can go. It has a "Who's My Legislator" feature, and it'll bring up a map, and you type in your home address, and it will show you your House member and your Senate member, and you get a direct link to email them. So that's the easiest way to do it.
And the Moorhead newspaper, they would have who the representatives were all the time also.
Yeah. Well, sometimes if you're in a rural area or a smaller county, it's very easy because you probably there's one of each for that county.
Yeah.
But if you're in Fayette County or a more urban county, it may be difficult to determine because those districts can be fairly small. So I would, I encourage go to the legislature's website, and it'll tell you based on your home address exactly who they are.
Okay. Well, wanted to just check one other thing, as we kind of look at the position you do beyond when the assembly's in session. What else do you do that's part of the work of the Catholic Conference of Kentucky? Is there a lot of research going on, or doing a lot of phone calls, or what?
Well, the work we do, do some educational stuff. We do, like I mentioned, some of the Catholics at the Capitol things. We've done some of those in the interim. But the work of session is very hectic. When session's over, we typically begin looking towards the next session, and the work of kind of drafting bills, of building coalitions, of educating legislators on what it is we're trying to do. If you wait till session starts to start helping legislators understand what you're trying to do with a bill, you're too late. And the interim, everything is slower. They have more time. And so we try to use that time to develop legislation, to build coalitions, and to build those relationships and educate legislators on what it is we're trying to do.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Now, when we wrap up, we'll be off the air and we'll have a chance to debrief a little bit. Deacon Tim, you have any other questions or anything else come in? Sounds like not. Well, Jason, I think of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and I'm not going to name them all, but one of them is wisdom. And under that, I see somebody in your role needing to be a philosopher, the ability to see both sides and to see the long run. Certainly a need to be a listener. And I think you have to do that. And being articulate, being able to express things in a good way, and being a gentleman, not to be abrasive, but to respect everybody, no matter where they're coming from, as legislators or even as people who want you to do things their way in terms of lobbying. You need to be somebody who's persistent, but also patient, and what a oxymoronic thing that is, but it needs to be part of it. And that's all part of the wisdom of also having a sense of timing. It sure seems like you got what it takes. You've been doing it for 10 years, and thank you for serving the church and serving our communities, serving our state. And in many ways being a servant of the bishops, so Bishop John, in addition to the other three bishops of Kentucky, they meet with you all periodically, I know, and you help them with some different kind of issues, and they help you to know also what to make the priorities as you move forward. So thank you for your ministry. Thanks for what you do as you serve the church. And you got any final words? We'll be able to wrap it up.
Oh, thank you very much for that. And it has always been an honor for me to represent the bishops. They have been, we've always been very blessed in Kentucky with our quality of bishops, and it's an honor to serve them.
All righty. Well, Deacon Tim, can you give a sense of what we'll be doing next week and let our folks know that?
Yeah, so if you see up, hopefully this is popping up. We have Dr. Melinda Moore that's going to join us, Associate Professor at the Department of Psychology in Eastern Kentucky University. And everybody knows, or maybe in your family or friends that have unfortunately chosen to take their life. So the topic is going to be suicide and suicide awareness. And so we're looking forward to hearing from Dr. Moore and having that conversation. So that's what will be happening next Thursday. We're on our regular time next Thursday, January 28th at 10 o'clock in the morning. So there you go.
Yeah, and I sure don't see it as a depressing topic. I see it as an important topic, and not necessarily a feel good, but to be aware of what we can do to help one another and to be brothers and sisters in the midst of some of the challenges in life that sometimes lead a person to choose against life. So I hope you can be with us as we seek to be real, as we seek to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. So blessings to everybody, and have great days.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you